In this lesson, we're going to work with a couple of projects. In other words, we will simply create Python programs just to recap whatever we have learned in previous lessons. And more importantly, these will be programmed from start to finish, and essentially we'll develop a few games. How about that? So in this project, we're going to create two programs. First, a number guessing game, and second, a rolling the dice game. So two games, two different programs, and each program would obviously have a different output depending upon the game. So we're going to start from scratch and develop these games. First, we're going to create a guessing the number game, or guess the number game, for instance. In this project, we're going to tell Python to create a program where users will guess numbers. And if they guess the correct number, fine. If they do not, then they will be given some chances. We will use the random module. It's a built-in module in Python that we can use. We can import the random module, and the standard random module simply implements a random number generator. The syntax is pretty straightforward. You simply type a line of code that says import random, and then use random.randint, and then specify the parameters. So let me in fact begin. Let's click on File, New File to bring up the Python shell. Let me make this fit this window. Perfect. So first is our guessing game. So I'm going to start off with a comment. This is our first number guessing game. Now obviously, if you were to start off with this, you would think about this game first. In other words, we have logic in our minds, a simple logic that we like to first obviously define a variable, specify certain parameters, tell Python the range of numbers, for instance, and then maybe do an input for the user, right, to enter the first number or guess a number, and then subsequently keep guessing, which means there is some kind of iteration within this logic, right? So maybe we'll use the if, else, while, or loop, in other words, so that until and unless the user guesses the right number, Python is going to keep asking for a number, right? So there's definitely a loop involved in this logic as well. So the first line of code is importing a random. So it's simply import random. And then I'm going to put another comment here. Once again, you can use comments to identify or explain each line of code or blocks of code. It depends upon your own requirement. I'm just going to say defining variables. And here's our first variable, for example, n equals random.rand int. And then of course the range that I like to specify, for instance, from 1 to, let's say I want the user to guess from 1 to 99. Okay, so this is my variable. And then I want another variable. I'm going to call it guess. And this is going to be an integer. And here I'm going to ask the user for input. So input. And I'm going to say enter an integer from 1 to 99 and close my parentheses. So here's simply a couple of variables. First variable is random.randint. In other words, we imported the random module, and next we're telling Python to ask or prompt the user to enter an integer from 1 to 99, or in other words, guess an integer. And notice I use a variable called guess because it's easier when I reuse it subsequently within the code. I can easily reference or call this variable and use this variable. Okay, my next comment is do a loop, right? So this will be a while loop because we're going to keep guessing. So I'm going to say while n, which is our range here, random.randint, n. Well, I'm not going to say equal. I'm going to say not equal to. Where n is not equal to guess, colon, and then of course Python automatically indents it. I'm going to tell Python to print But not yet. I'm going to use the if statement now. And if the guess is less than n, then print guess is low, right? Because if it's less than the number that Python generates as a random number, I'm going to tell here that print your guess is low. Or I'm just going to say, of course, if I use a print, make things simple here, guess is low. And if the guess is low, then of course I need to also mention that guess integer, and then use another input because I want the user to use another input at this point, and say the same thing. Enter an integer from 1 to 99. Okay, so see what's going on so far? All we're doing is we're importing the random, we're defining some variables, we're doing the while loop here, and within the while loop we're also specifying the if conditions, right? So the first if simply says if the guess number is less than n, print guess is low. In other words, guess again. And here I can say elif, recall the elif, right? So if all the statements are true, it's going to keep asking until it becomes false. So I'm going to say elif guess is greater than n. So in this instance, do what? Do print guess is high. It's just the opposite. Guess is high. Next, of course, I need to define guess again, because if the guess is too high, then I want to prompt the user again to guess lower, right? So I'm going to say integer one more time, input, and then prompt the user. Of course, I can simply go up here and copy this and paste, so I don't have to type the entire text again, and simply close my parentheses. So at this point, I'm doing a while loop, and within my while loop, I'm saying if the number is low, guess again. If the number is high, of course, guess again. And in both instances, Python is going to print if the guess is low, that means the user is going to guess a higher number. And on the other hand, if the guess is high, then the user is going to guess a lower number. And next, of course, I'm going to say else and print here you guessed it, right? And here I'm going to break the loop. And recall, if I do not use the break, the while loop is going to become an infinite one, right? So I need to make sure I break, and then of course finally the print. Perfect. So here's a simple guessing game that we created. We use the import random. We specify the range 1 to 99, and you could do so 1 to 250 depending upon your own criteria. And then we said guess, prompt the user for an input. Next, we simply did a while loop, and then we nested it, the while loop, with the if, elif, and else statements. Let's see what happens when we run the module and see whether our number guessing game is correct or not. So let's click run module. Of course, the source must be saved. Click OK. Brings up our Windows Explorer. Let me navigate to my Python's folder here. Under Documents, Data Files, Python. And I'm going to say My Game as the name of the module. Click Save. And Python prompts me to enter an integer from 1 to 99. And again, this is coming from this line right here. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and guess a number between 1 to 99. I'm going to say it's 50. Hit the enter key. Python says guess is high. Enter the integer from 1 to 99 one more time. So again, now I'm in the loop area, right? So here, since I've already guessed 50 and Python said it's high, that means the number is obviously lower than 50, right? So what if I say 40? Python says guess is still high. What if I say 30? Now Python says the guess is low. So I know that the number is between 30 and 40. So if I guess 35, Python says guess is low, which means the number is higher than 35 and lower than 40. So here, how about 37? Perfect. So Python says you guessed it. So the correct number is 37. So a very simple yet powerful guessing game that you created in Python. So practice, work with it, and of course you can build upon this. You can add more criteria to it. You can enter more input statements, for instance. You can do additional loops. You can expand this game to make it a little bit more interesting. Maybe do more print statements so that the users are engaged within this game. But I just wanted to demonstrate quickly how to create your own games in Python. Let's do another one. Let's do another game. So let me close this. So once again, the guessing number game, pretty straightforward. Next, let me do the rolling dice game. We're going to create another game. Of course, use the same random module. It'll be good practice. So in this game, we will create a game to generate random numbers when the dice is rolled. So whenever you use dice and you roll the dice, you get some numbers, right? And you really don't know what numbers you're going to get. Maybe you get 2, maybe you get 6, maybe you get 4, maybe you get 5, and so on. And once again, we'll use the same random module. So I'm going to click on File, New. And this brings up our Python editor here. So let me just expand this so we can see. So here my first comment is, this is a rolling dice game. And in this instance, I'm going to use the same module, import random, to generate some random numbers, right? And of course, our next step is defining our variables. So let's say I'm going to define a min variable here, and that's 1. And of course, within our dice, the maximum value or the number or the integer in a dice is 6, right? Great. So I've defined 2 variables after I imported the random module. So here I'm telling Python the minimum value is 1 and the maximum value is 6. And I'm going to specify roll again because I'm going to keep guessing, right? So I'm going to say roll again equals yes. And the reason why I use the underscore after the word roll is just to specify or connect the 2 words together in English, roll again. I don't have to use the underscore. I can simply say it as one word, which is fine. Okay. But just to keep the distances so it's easier to read, I use the underscore as a variable name. Next, I'm going to do my while statement. So while roll again equals, and of course in Python equal means double equal sign, equals yes, or roll again equals y. And the reason why I wrote this, because when Python says, do you want to roll again? And you simply say yes, yes, which is fine. But what if you were to just say y and hit the enter key? Python would not do anything unless you specify here. So either you can say yes, or you can simply type y and hit the enter key to roll again. And here's my colon because I use the while statement. Next, I'm simply going to print, and I'm going to say rolling the dices, ... Next, I'm going to print the values are, for instance, the values are ... Alright, so I'm doing the while, yes, roll the dices, the values are, and then of course I need to print the values, right? So I need to do print random dot randint, and then the values, right? So I'm going to say min, comma, max. And again, these will be randomly generated. Close my parentheses. But for right now, all we did was do a while statement. It's going to print, roll the dices, print the values are, and then print the output as the numbers. Okay. So next, I'm going to say roll again. And here I'm going to ask the user for the input. roll the dices again. Ask a question, close the parentheses, and of course my else finally print for playing this wonderful game. Let's see what happens when we run this game. So let's click on run module, click OK to save. And here's my Windows Explorer. I'm going to navigate to my Documents folder, Data Files, and Python folder. And I'm going to say Dice Game. Click Save. And Python simply displays the output and says rolling the dices, the values are ... 3. Roll the dices again. If I say yes, Python is going to roll the dice again. But notice at this point the values are 3 at this point. Only, in other words, 1 dice is being rolled. And here's why when I use this line of code where it says print random, randint, min max, it only uses 1 set of dice. So I simply would copy this and paste it again. Of course, do my indentation, make some space here. So I'm going to repeat because there are 2 dices. So Python is going to generate a number here and a number here. Let's run this again. Run module. Click OK. And this time Python says rolling the dices, the values are 4 and 5. Roll the dices again. If I say yes, Python gives me a couple of more values, 1 and 5. Roll the dices again. Even if I say yes or just the letter Y, and the reason why, because I've told Python that either I can use yes or I can say Y. So roll the dices again, letter Y. Python is going to roll the dice again, and I'm going to get a new set of numbers and prompts me input. Roll the dices again, and since at the end of my code I simply said else print thank you for playing this wonderful game. So in this instance, even if I write anything or any number, letter, text, Python is going to print thank you for playing this wonderful game. So roll the dices again. I'm going to say no. Thank you for playing this wonderful game. And the program ends. So you've seen Python, very easy to use language, logical language. All you need to do is just understand your logic first, define your steps, create a flowchart first, and then start creating your code. And the more you practice, the easier it'll become for you. And you'll start remembering the syntax, you'll start remembering the methods, the modules, and the way Python works. So I hope this helps practice, and let's move to our next lesson.